Welcome back to another edition of Between Two Fars. I'm Mordecai Miller, and I have been enjoying my talk with Brian Stanford. We are talking about the differences between litigating in front of the GAO and litigating in front of COFC. One of these areas that's maybe really important to you, even if you're not litigating, maybe you're just doing case research. What is the difference in precedential value between these two courts? Brian, what's up? How do we decide the weight of these cases?
It's a great question, Mordecai, and one that I think has perplexed and confounded bid protest practitioners for many years and likely will continue to do so. But at a high level, when you're talking about impact of precedent, when you're at the GAO, GAO attorneys, are hearing examiners that author decisions from the GAO and for bid protests are typically bound by other GAO precedents. So you're going to see in a GAO decision citations to other GAO cases. Occasionally you see a citation to other courts, which we'll talk about here, such as the Federal Circuit, for instance. The Federal Circuit is kind of viewed as the final authority on a particular area of law that relates to particular bid protest. So what you see at GAO oftentimes is because of this being bound by other GAO precedent, you see oftentimes draconian sometimes and formulaic results because the GAO is just kind of in that loop of relying on its own precedent. Now, the exception to that, obviously, as I said, is the Federal Circuit, which GAO is also bound by. At Court of Federal Claims, you have judges that are not bound by the decisions of their brethren. So you might have one Court of Federal Claims judge that comes out one way on a legal issue, and another that is that comes out another way, and that's completely okay because they are not bound by their own decisions.
Wow.
And it's interesting because it in effect it can create almost like a miniature circuit split within the court. But it also has, I think, the positive attribute of allowing judges to take more of a common sense approach. And again, you kind of get a sense of how a particular judge has ruled on a given issue in previous cases. What I've seen, the trend line is that for the most part, the Court of Federal Claims is consistent in the application of precedent with a few minor or not so minor exceptions. But above all, just like with the GAO, the court is obviously bound by the Federal Circuit and the precedent that's set by that court with respect to issues of bid protest law. Now, the Federal Circuit doesn't weigh in on things very often, but it's critical when it does because it can also it can oftentimes resolve splits between these decisional bodies or even splits within, for instance, the Court of Federal Claims. But before leaving this topic, I do think it's also really worth mentioning for practitioners that there are obviously sometimes very significant differences in substantive legal standards on actual merits issues between these fora. And so it's important to be aware of those differences because and to understand what they are, because it's really going to impact the agency's litigating posture, and it may inform where a protester decides to go or not go on a particular issue. Off the top of my head, some of the major kind of areas of law where we see pretty drastic differences in these decisional bodies. Number one, late proposal cases, also corrective action protests. The standard for litigating corrective action protests is different. Allegations of bad faith with regard to conduct of agency officials, there's definitely a difference in the standard and the application of that standard between the two reviewing bodies. And then IDIQ awardee standing to protests is also, we see a major difference there. And finally, unavailability of key personnel when you've got a proposer that proposes key personnel who are subsequently unavailable at time of award and contract performance, we see a pretty major difference in the way that the reviewing bodies review protests regarding that issue.
Those are some hot button issues. This difference in precedential value can be very important to your case.
Absolutely.
Wow, thank you so much for this precedential value in a nutshell talk. This is very helpful. And if you have a case that involves any of those issues, make sure you dig into that case law and figure out where you stand in the forum you're in. Join us again next time, Between Two FARs.